All right, that's beginning to look a little bit more like it. Adjusting some settings, but we have the Kybalion, Hermetic Philosophy, from the three initiates, and namely William Walker Atkinson. This is a study of the Hermetic philosophy of ancient Egypt and Greece. The lips of wisdom are closed except to the ears of understanding. It has been a long time, ladies and gentlemen, close to, if not over a year since we did our last video in this series and the last video for this channel. But sometimes in life, as we all know, there are seasons. And we go through these seasons, and we must honor these seasons, not talking about spring and summer and fall and winter, but the seasons of our lives. And there are times of great activity and there are times of rest. And even the Leonardo da Vinci said that it is almost more important to take these times of rest because we can return with a renewed vigor, a renewed ability. And so, diving back into Hermetic philosophy, I started listening to Manly P. Hall recently, which is funny because I always used to get comments on this series. We've done the previous 12 chapters of this book in a playlist on the channel. So if you haven't seen that, be sure to check that out. But the law, which is the all, is what we are talking about. And so I thought it was time today. I guess it felt like it because I'm here and we are recording to get into the 13th chapter of the Kybalion Hermetic philosophy. I thought in my mind that we were on the last chapter of this book and possibly the last video of this series, and maybe that's why I subconsciously did not finish it because I didn't want it to be over. But that's apparently not the case, as we have the 13th chapter on gender, the 14th chapter on mental gender, which are hot topics nowadays. Be careful what you say, ladies and gentlemen. It's crazy. The 15th chapter, which is entitled Hermetic Axioms, the possession of knowledge, unless accompanied by a manifestation and expression and action, is like the hoarding of precious metals, a vain and foolish thing. Because remember, knowledge is like wealth. It is intended for use. It is intended for use. And so this recording and this reading and my ramblings and interpretations of what I do read and what comes to mind here is for purposes of teaching and commentary, and exactly that, expanding the mind so that through an increased awareness, we can increase the quality of our lives and hopefully the lives of those around us. Now, without me rambling anymore, let's just dive into it and get a video recorded. It's great to be back. October 20th here, 2025. And it's been, like I said, almost a year. So great to be back. Good to see you, ladies and gentlemen, and hope to hear from you in the comments below. All right. Chapter 13 of the Kybalion, Hermetic Philosophy, entitled Gender. In quotations, gender is in everything. Everything has both its masculine and its feminine principles. We have a kitten distraction. All right, kitten distractions are welcome because they remind us to come back down to Earth, but we haven't left Earth yet. So let us continue. Gender manifests on all planes. What are we talking about? The seventh great Hermetic principle, the principle of gender, embodies the truth that there is gender manifested in everything, that the masculine and feminine principles are ever present and active in all phases of phenomena on each and every plane of life. So all the way from the mineral kingdom to the plant kingdom, up and further beyond. And these masculine and feminine principles have unique characteristics and traits. I'm adding this. Let's continue with what the book says here. Quote, at this point, we think it well to call your attention to the fact that gender, in this philosophical, hermetic philosophical sense, and sex in the ordinarily accepted use of the terms, are not the same thing. So once again, it is important to bring to attention here and disclaim to everyone that this understanding, this mystery, or this secret understanding, this esoteric, occult, hidden, lost understanding of gender is not the same thing as our ordinarily accepted use of the term. And so, keeping that in mind, I'll say it once more that gender, in this philosophic hermetic sense, and sex, in the ordinarily accepted use of the terms, are not the same. The word gender here is derived from the Latin root meaning to beget, to procreate, to generate, to create, to produce. A moment's consideration will show you that the word has a much broader, a much deeper, I'll add, and the book continues, a more general meaning than the term sex or sexes to describe what is commonly understood as gender. The later referring to the physical distinctions between, the latter rather, referring to the physical distinctions between male and female living things. Sex is merely a manifestation of gender. Now think about that. We have this, there's all these principles in this philosophy and in these ancient philosophies, which I like to call the wisdom of the ages, which is funny. I didn't know the book existed entitled The Secret Teachings of the Ages, but we're just getting into that and discovering those things. Surprisingly, we hadn't done that before we got here, but everybody's journey is on a different path and a different order, so to speak. But this idea that this overarching principle, as above, so below, the macro and the micro, and the macro affecting or having aspects of it manifest in the micro. And so the sexes, as we, understand them, are just merely one appearance or manifestation of this principle of gender. And sex is merely a manifestation of gender on a certain plane of the great physical plane, the plane of organic life. And remember, there are multiple planes, which we went over in previous chapters, and then each of those planes are broken down into 7 subsequent planes. A little example here, 7 minor mental planes is more or less satisfactory and arbitrary, but we may as well mention them here. So this is the 7 minor mental planes. Once again, we have the, let me state them. If you've been here before, I tend to go everywhere, and that's the fun of this, because this is for a thought experiment. This isn't a perfect audiobook because there are other places for that. But the minor mental planes, number 1, the plane of mineral mind, 2, plane of elemental mind, 3, plant mind, and then elemental mind B, plane of animal mind, elemental mind C, and the plane of human mind. You could see how they elevate. But we have the mental plane, the physical plane, and the etheric plane, or the spiritual plane. These are the 3 great planes of reality. the lowest point of which is an undifferentiated matter, and the highest point of that of spirit. And moreover, the book says, so quoting from the book here, the different planes shade into each other. So there's a blending or a gray area or a transition area, you could call it, so that no hard or fast division may be made between the higher phenomena of the physical and the lower of the mental, or the higher of the mental and the lower of the spiritual, and vice versa. And so let us go back now to our spot in the chapter of gender. And so this, our understanding of sexes is just merely a manifestation of this overarching principle that has its effect in the great physical plane as well as the mental and spiritual planes, I would guess. The book continues, quote, "We wish to impress this distinction upon your minds for the reason that certain writers who have acquired a smattering of the Hermetic philosophy have sought to identify this seventh Hermetic principle with wild and fanciful and often reprehensible theories and teachings regarding sex. The office of gender is solely that of creating, producing, generating, etc., and its manifestations are visible on every plane of phenomena. It is somewhat difficult to produce proofs of this along certain scientific lines for the reason that science has not as yet recognized this principle as of universal application." It's funny how the sciences are just, ever more as we go forward, beginning to catch up to the lost knowledge that we used to have. That was what got me so excited about this in the beginning of the introduction to the Kybalion, as well as the Hermetica, which is on my bookshelf over here. But man, the introduction to the Hermetica and talking about how this knowledge was lost and then reacquired and spread and then destroyed and hidden and lost again, and where it is this process of rediscovery for humanity and our souls and our spirits as an experience to elevate and to grow. I'm rambling once again. Let me continue with where we are in the book. Once again, thank you for being here. And so it is somewhat difficult, as I was saying, to produce proofs of this along scientific lines because science has not yet to recognize this great principle, which is obviously a part of natural law, which is what we're discovering here, the nature of the things that are, as Hermes Trismegistus put it. There can be no truer religion or no truer spiritual pursuit or philosophy than to seek to know the things that are, to understand the laws of reality and nature and the symbolism therein, so that we can apply that to the elevation of ourselves. So, but still some proofs are forthcoming from scientific sources. In the first place, we will find a distinct manifestation of this seventh Hermetic principle of gender among the corpuscles, ions, or electrons, which constitute the basis of matter, as science now knows the latter, and which by forming certain combinations form the atom, which until lately was regarded as final and indivisible. The latest word of science is that the atom is composed of a multitude of corpuscles, electrons, and ions, the various names being applied to the different different authorities. And these, electrons, ions, neutrons, croutons, as Wayne Dyer used to joke, but they're revolving around each other and vibrating at a high degree and intensity. But the accompanying statement is made that the formation of the atom is really due to the clustering of negative corpuscles around a positive one. The positive corpuscle seeming to exert a certain influence upon the negative ones. Now, the positive and the negative principles, the electric and the magnetic, the expansive and the contractive principles, these are all important to understand the symbology and the meaning thereof. Do I know that? Well, I guess only a little bit, enough as I have pondered. And the other great teaching of Hermes Trismegistus, thrice greatest, was that only through a constant contemplation, through a constant meditation, a rumination, a ponderation upon these things, may we come to know the true knowledge. We'll remind ourselves of those quotes at some point in this video, as I have always done in this series, in the series that I did on the Hermetica and the Corpus Hermeticum, and finally the Kybalion. It's been a wonderful time, and I am at a loss for why it's been a year now since I have done a video, but here we are. Glad to be here. Hope you're doing well. I love and appreciate each and every one of you, even if there's only 3 of you that watch this video. Pat yourself on the back, because we're here seeking after knowledge. I just heard today that a mystic is just that, a seeker of wisdom, of truth, of knowledge. And so, speaking of these positive and negative polarities, these expansive and contractive principles, let's go back to what the book was saying. These positive corpuscles, thinking of ions and electrons and atoms, the formation of the atom is really due to the clustering of negative around a positive. The positive corpuscles seeming to exert a certain influence. Now, it's symbolism here, metaphorology. Metaphorically, the positive exerts an influence upon the negative. The expansive exerts an influence upon the contractive, causing the latter to assume certain combinations and thus create, quote unquote, or generate an atom. This is in line with the most ancient Hermetic teachings, which have always identified the masculine principle of gender with the positive and the feminine principle with the negative, or masculine with the electric and feminine with the magnetic. That would require more being more specific, because I'm not entirely certain on that. So I'll leave that there. Now, a word at this point regarding this identification. And so, once again, the masculine principle of gender with the positive and the feminine with the negative poles of electricity, so called. Now, a word at this point regarding this identification. The public mind has formed an entirely erroneous impression regarding the qualities of the so-called negative pole of electrified or magnetized matter. Keep in mind, electric and magnetic are extremely important in the understanding of the nature of reality and its laws and their functions. And understanding that can give us a greater, I think, ability to have an influence on our own realities. Now, this erroneous, wrong impression regarding the qualities of so-called negative, the terms positive and negative are very wrongly applied to this phenomena by science. The word positive means something real, and strong as compared with a negative unreality or weakness. And nothing is further from the real facts of electrical phenomena. The so-called negative pole of the battery is really the pole in and by which the generation or production of the new forms and energies is manifested. Now, think about that. If the feminine principles, which are responsible in metaphor for the creation of new lives, birth, so to speak, and so the positive exerting an influence onto the negative, allowing the production of the creation. Now, once again, nothing is further from the real fact in electrical phenomena that it is the negative pull of the battery, and it is the feminine principle of reality that is responsible, but not without influence from the opposite. See, everything is dependent. This goes back to cause and effect and the principle of polarity, the principle of rhythm, the principle of cause and effect. And now we find ourselves on the principle of gender. This all goes together and it builds up as an understanding that then you can come back down to and create new foundations and plant new seeds and grow new trees of knowledge and understanding and inner wisdom, personal wisdom, personal revelation, the aha, satori, enlightenment moment that can come to us in an instant, but once again, it comes from a great contemplation, a great meditation, and constantly. And so, without me rambling again, let's continue. It is somewhat difficult. And so, the terms positive and negative we're now learning have been wrongfully applied by science because there's a deeper understanding. And so, understanding that it's the negative that is not unreality or weakness or bad, as we call it. I mean, to be simple, to talk about negative and positive energy is easy to understand as good and bad, but it's not that simple, really. To communicate, sure, we can simplify, but for deep understanding of the nature of reality, we must extrapolate. So negative being responsible when it comes to the negative pull of a battery is really the pull by which the generation or production of new forms. See, when that I immediately think of creating new life, but new forms and energies is manifested. There is nothing, quote unquote, negative about it. The best scientific authorities now use the word cathode in place of negative. The word cathode coming from the Greek root meaning descent or the path of generation. That immediately made me think, isn't it weird how in order to grow, most often we must descend in our own spiritual, personal life journeys? The greatest growth comes out of sometimes our greatest struggles. Out of the valley of the shadows, we can make our way out to the light. And if you are going through hell, quote unquote, the great quote is to not pitch a tent and stop, but keep going and keep growing, as they would say, and you will make your way out. But this Greek root for the cathode in place of negative, meaning descent or the path of generation. From the cathode pole emerged the swarm of electrons or corpuscles. From the same pole emerged those wonderful quote unquote rays, which have revolutionized scientific conception during the past decade. And this book was written decades ago. And once again, we're reading for purposes of teaching and commentary and expanding the mind. And these are just my thoughts and extrapolations of what I'm getting from this while I'm reading it. Because I used to say I would be doing this anyway by myself, but then I started doing it with you, and so I haven't done it by myself until we're back here now doing it together. But I'm inviting you to join me on my journey in contemplating the lost wisdom of the ages, the secret, you know, mystery teachings of reality, so that through this greater awareness and understanding of the nature of reality, we can hopefully create a greater awareness and understanding of the nature of ourselves. And to know thyself is to really take a step in the right direction, to put it simply. Now, let's continue. Emerge those wonderful rays which have revolutionized scientific conceptions during the past decade. The cathode pole is the mother of all of the strange phenomena which have rendered useless the old textbooks and which have caused many long accepted theories to be relegated to the scrap pile of scientific speculation. The cathode, or negative pole, is the mother principle of electrical phenomena. I thought of Mother Earth, of Gaia there, of this electric principle. The sun, the light influences on the Mother Earth, Gaia, and she then brings forth, as what's being described here, the multitude of forms. Right? Where was that bit just a second ago about the cathode and the bringing the production? Right here. It forms cathode in place of negative. But once again, is this pole, the negative pole, by which the generation or production of new forms and energies is manifested. So if you look at the world and the life that springs forth in the many and various and unlimited forms that come forth from this process that is being described, once again, just a symbology to try to understand from reality and nature there. But this cathode pole is the mother of all the strange phenomena which have rendered useless the old textbooks. The cathode negative pole is the mother principle of electrical phenomena and of the finest forms of matter as yet known to science. So you see, we are justified, says the author, says William Walker Atkinson. This book was written by, quote unquote, the three initiates, but as not knowing to the exact identities of these three initiates. It's mostly credited to William Walker Atkinson, who lived 1862 to 1932, Baltimore, Maryland, and Chicago. And he began writing many books and articles in the vein of New Thought, a movement that stresses the power of the mind in creating reality, which is how we got here. This idea and this obsession and this fascination rather, with this possibility and reality of this ability that we all have to create our reality through focused thought and intention. Because the first time you hear that, you're like, ha ha. And then after we keep hearing it for years and we begin to put the mysteries of the ages and the wisdom of the sages together, we begin to discover that they were onto something. So without rambling any further, let me continue on this seventh great hermetic principle of gender. Thank you for joining me and being here. I love and appreciate each and every one of you that joins me on this journey so that we can learn and discover together. I am no master. I don't even know if I'm a good student, really. Probably just somebody with a mind that goes everywhere. The Hermetic teachings include a lot of stuff, to put it simply, but they include much regarding the operation of the two principles of gender in the production and manifestation of various forms of energy, etc. We'll get back to that though, because remember, we were talking about how science has yet to see this, and this cathode, the negative pole, is responsible for the generation or creation, and it is the mother principle of electrical phenomena. So you see, they're justified. The author is where we rambled on to who the author is for a second, is justified in refusing to use the term negative in their consideration of the subject and in insisting upon substituting the word feminine for the old term. The facts of the case bear us out in this, without taking the Hermetic teachings into consideration. And so we shall use the word feminine in the place of negative in speaking of that pole of activity. Now, the latest scientific teachings are that the creative corpuscles or electrons are feminine, quote unquote negative. Science says, quote, they are composed of negative electricity. We say that they are composed of feminine energy. See, it's all the same thing, just different words. You look at all these different theologies or spiritual philosophies, mystery traditions, but they're all, see, this is why we're here. We're obsessed with this thing that seems to be the most important thing throughout all of our history forever. It's like all of humanity in different forms and various ways is attempting to understand, relate to, harmonize with, describe, explain God, the all, the Tao, the one, grand organized design, God. But whatever it is, we are still here in 2025, whatever year, because we know the timelines are all wacky. But we don't have it pinned down. And all of those great philosophers that have attempted to describe God always describe it as indescribable. The Tao that can be spoken is not the eternal Tao. Now, let us continue. And so, the latest scientific teachings get us to this different understanding. But when we can look at this negative electricity in a Hermetic philosophical way, we can begin to see. Uh-oh, we got a kitten playing with the camera. She wanted to be in the video, folks. She said, hello, I'm right here. Just give me some scratches. Give me some scratches. That's all kittens want. Now, the feminine energy. So negative electricity, feminine energy. Positive electricity. See, I always thought the electric was the male and the magnetic was the feminine principles. But there's, this is why constant contemplation. We can continue to add understandings to this, ladies and gentlemen. Feminine energy. rather than negative electricity. A feminine corpuscle becomes detached, form, or rather leaves a masculine corpuscle and starts on a new career. It actively seeks a union with a masculine corpuscle, being urged thereto by the natural impulse to create new forms of matter or energy. Now, that is a very deep, very esoteric statement there. There's a lot contained within that. So I'll say it once more. A feminine corpuscle becomes detached from, or rather leaves, a masculine corpuscle and starts a new career. It actively seeks union with a masculine corpuscle, being urged thereto by the natural impulse to create new forms of matter or energy. One writer goes so far as to use the term, it at once seeks of its own volition a union. I was just thinking yesterday or the day before, the meaning of yoga is union. And this practice through the body and the mind of attempting to create greater union or harmony or connection with the all, Atum, the one God, with God, union with God. And this feminine principle seeking of its own volition a union, this detachment and uniting from the basis of the greater part of the activities of the chemical world. That could have its own deep implications. When the feminine corpuscle unites with the masculine one, a certain process is begun. The feminine particles vibrate rapidly under the influence of the masculine energy and circle rapidly around the latter. The result is the birth of a new atom. I mean, think about this in metaphor. The feminine particle vibrates rapidly. Why, though? Why? All of a sudden, under the influence of the masculine energy, or the electric, or the heat, or the expansive principle. Because what happens when you apply heat to something? Well, how does something heat up? It is the increased frequency or vibration of the molecules. It is the increased agitation or activity of the thing itself. And this is an effect of this positive or masculine principle. Remember, positive and negative needing different understandings than what we're most commonly given. That's fascinating, though. An attempt to create a union, very part of the feminine corpuscle. When it unites with the masculine, this process begins. The feminine particles vibrate rapidly under the influence of the expansive principle, the masculine energy, and circle rapidly around the latter. The result is the birth and the creation of a new atom. This new atom is really composed of a union of both the masculine and the feminine electrons or corpuscles, as it's been calling them here today. But remember, all of this is metaphor for a higher symbolic understanding of the function of nature and the laws of reality. So once again, this new atom is composed of a union of the masculine and feminine electrons. But when the union is formed, the atom is itself a separate thing. And see, this is another reason I love these philosophies, because it's filled with paradox after paradox and the paradoxical unity in the nature of duality and reality. What does that mean? The conflicting and difficult to understand oneness of this seemingly separate, individualized nature of the physical life we find ourselves existing in. Because you could look at a cup and say, this is a cup and I am me. And inside there is a bag and also tea. And we've written some poetry. But no, like there is this oneness. Like the cup wouldn't be here without the unlimited events that were all united and tied together to lead it to end up here, united in my hand to take a sip. Once again, thank you, Mom, for this teacup. Soothing pleasures are the best. Tea soothes the soul. And we are still drinking our Yogi brand tea, green tea kombucha, ladies and gentlemen. It is my favorite. It says on it today, love is the highest of all virtues. Also, clarity could be the highest. All right. How much do we have left? Yeah, only a page and a half. So we'll finish this whole chapter here today, ladies and gentlemen. And I'll try not to ramble too much more so we can get to the end of it and we can come back to this. This is why I started again today, because I want to get this finished and I wanted to get into much more stuff. I just recently got Initiates of the Flame by Mr. Hall himself. And I look forward to diving into this one with you, ladies and gentlemen, revealing the hidden wisdom behind myth and legend and the exploration of ancient symbology. Symbols like the pyramid, the Holy Grail, the all seeing eye, the flame of wisdom, and much more. Hopefully, we've added a spark to your flame today. Now, masculine and feminine electrons, the union is formed, the atom is a separate thing, having certain properties, separate but existing within a oneness, but no longer manifesting the property of free electricity. The process of detachment or separation from the feminine electrons is called ionization. These electrons, or corpuscles, are the most active workers in nature's field. Arising from their unions or combinations manifest the varied phenomena of light, heat, electricity, magnetism, attraction, repulsion, chemical affinity, and the reverse and similar phenomena. Remember, keeping in mind, everything that we see in physical reality, including ourselves and the chairs that we sit in or the floors that we stand on, give the mineral kingdom some credit because we're walking all over it all the time, ladies and gentlemen. But it's like combinations, varied phenomena, everything that exists in physical reality comes from a non-physicalness, a realm of waves to the world of particles, from the ether to the plane, the great physical plane. And then there's the mental plane in between there. Once again, a constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of, as described in the Hermetic philosophy, Atum, or the All, the One God. And so all this arises from the operation of the principle of gender on the plane of energy. The part of the masculine principle that seems to be that of directing a certain inherent energy towards the feminine principle, and thus starting the activity, the creation process. But the feminine principle is always the one doing the active creative work. So if we want to be creators in our lives, be co-creators, or be responsible for the creation of our own reality, we have to activate our feminine aspect while influencing that side of ourselves with the masculine aspect or principle of ourselves. Once again, each and every one of us, whether you are either gender or sex, or the many in betweens that there may be politically correctly nowadays. But if you're here listening to me, I'm sure you're not very confused. Because if you are, you might not be so interested in said topics. Without going any further on that, though, we must activate both of these aspects of ourselves in order to take part in the manifestation or creation of our lives process. And so keep that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, because it is important. I felt it important right now as I'm reading this. I don't really know if it is actually. It just seemed like that would definitely be the case because this is making sense. This is resonating. And so if this is resonating with you, if you're getting maybe some different thoughts from your own resonations, let me know what you're getting from this and leave that in the comments below and share because we can all use the help. This is a group effort here. This is a group contemplation. And so it is incapable, the part of the masculine principle seems to be that directing inherent energy towards the feminine principle, thus starting the activity of the creation process. But the feminine principle is always the one doing the active creative work. And this is so on all planes. And remember the three great planes. There's the mental plane, number one. Nope, already wrong. See, I'm already getting, this is why we're here learning together. Once again, three great planes. What is it? The mental one is the middle, spiritual one, and at the lowest, grossest form, the physical plane. But that doesn't mean it's the worst either. To judge these things would be silly. Now, but these three great planes and these principles being manifest on all of them. And it is the feminine principle on each of these great planes and their seven minor subplanes. It is the feminine principle that is the one that is always doing the active creative work. And yet each principle is incapable of operative energy without the assistance of the other. Always dependent, the yin and the yang, the darkness exists, but yet the light exists, and they only exist because both do. Because one is dependent on the other for its very existence. If there was no wrong, would there be any right? Because there would be nothing to contrast it with. It would just be. And that is a real secret understanding, or maybe not secret at all. That is a real basic learning and wisdom for oneself, is that everything really just is. And for us to judge it one way or the other is a human observation. And we should know the fallacy of such observations, but sometimes the inherent also revelations that we can get from these observations. Yet, Each principle is incapable of operative energy without the assistance of the other. Everything is dependent upon its opposites. And this was in this book earlier, The Divine Paradox, as well as all three of the series we've done on Hermetic philosophy and talking about polarity, the all in all. Anyways, be sure to check that out if you missed any of these videos. And for that matter, the two principles are combined in one organism. So the female's principle, negative electric polarity, is always doing the creative work, the generation of form and energy. The two principles are combined in one. No. All right. I missed a sentence there. They're incapable of working without the assistance of each other. In some of the forms of life, the two principles are combined in one organism. For that matter, everything in the organic world manifests both genders. There is always the masculine present in the feminine form. And the feminine form, I think that might have been a typo. There is always the masculine present in the feminine form and the feminine. Yeah, but it probably was meant to say both ways there. The Hermetic teachings include much regarding the operation of the two principles of gender. And too bad we don't have 50,000 hours worth of lectures and podcasts about the explanation of that sentence. The Hermetic teachings, like, where are these Hermetic teachings? I've gone through a couple books, but man, those could be expanded on and explained in depth for another 500 books. Too bad they burned down the libraries of Alexandria and many other great centers of this kind of wisdom. But with that being said, in the production, the Hermetic teachings include much regarding the operation of the two principles of gender in the production and manifestation of various forms of energy, but we do not deem it expedient to go into detail regarding the same at this point. Careful, can't press that button, B. Can't press that button. But we do not deem it expedient to go into detail regarding the same at this point because we are unable to back up the same with scientific proof. And see, this is always the problem. Our logical minds are like, we want proof. Show me the evidence. But we know deeper with our higher selves or our spirit or soul, whatever you want to call it, that there is something to this, even though the physical proof doesn't always present itself to us. But remember to look for the symbolism, because this is the way that the secrets will reveal themselves to us, apparently, in reality and nature. And so, silly kitten, you can't walk on the keyboard. Because we're unable to back it up with scientific proof for the reason that science has once again has not yet progressed this far. It's like we've come so far, but we still know so little. And the more we continue to deny the mystical truths of our past and call them fanciful theories and silliness and mumbo jumbo and hocus pocus, well, we better begin to reconsider that which we used to call silly, which now is apparently aspects of the nature of reality. Once again, it's been probably a year, almost exactly, since I've done one of these videos. So if this is a bad video, then thumbs up or thumbs down. Either way, We are here. On we are here. Just think of the time. Yeah. Dun. You don't got to think about it. It is right here. It is right now. So, because science has not yet progressed this far, so we don't need to explain it because it will go against what we accept as known truth. But the example, the author continues, the book continues, we have given you of the phenomena for the of the rather electrons and corpuscles that we have talked about here today will show us that science is luckily on the right path. And we're probably getting closer and closer, being now in October, almost November of 2025. And it will show us that science is on the right path. And we will also get a general idea of the underlying principles with the examples that have been given today. Some leading scientific investigators have announced their belief in the formation of crystals, that in the formation of crystals there was to be found something that corresponded to quote unquote sex activity, which is another straw showing the direction of the scientific winds are blowing. And each year will bring other facts to corroborate the correctness of the Hermetic principle of gender. It will be found that gender is in constant operation and manifestation in the field of organic as well as inorganic matter. Once again, got to give credit to the mineral kingdom. It's a level of consciousness. And in the field of energy or force, electricity is now generally regarded as the quote unquote something into which all forms of energy seem to melt or dissolve. The electrical theory of the universe is the latest scientific. Let's see, I was making sure the recording was going because the cat's stepping on the pause/play button there, trying to stop the recording. But we all love a good kitten every now and then. So let's get to the end here. We're on the last page, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, thank you for being here. Hopefully, this was somewhat understandable. Now, it will be found that gender is in constant operation and manifestation in the field of inorganic as well as organic matter in the field of energy or force. Electricity is now generally regarded as the something into which all other forms of energy seem to melt or dissolve. The dissolution is often something that's referenced in these esoteric occult philosophies. The quote unquote electrical theory of the universe is the latest electric universe theory. Wow. I did not know that was a thing until recently. You know, that electric universe theory is a big one. But right here, if you haven't heard about that, check that out. And check out Science Without Consensus. Used to be Magnetic Reversal News, Cosmic Catastrophe, YouTube channel, any one of those names. They will describe electric universe theory. But even at the very root and source, this electric theory of the universe, this latest scientific doctrine, is growing rapidly and in popularity and general acceptance because it, I'll add this, makes the most sense. Especially when looking at, now we'll cease from digressing. But, and it thus follows that if we are capable to discover the phenomena of electricity, even at the very root and source of its manifestations, a clear and unmistakable evidence of the presence of gender and its activities. We are justified in asking, the author is justified in asking us, ladies and gentlemen, you and me here today, to believe that science at last has offered proofs of the existence in all universal phenomena of that great Hermetic principle, the principle of gender. It is not necessary to take up your time with the well-known phenomena of the attraction and repulsion, quote unquote, of the atoms, chemical affinity, alchemy, the quote unquote loves and hates of the atomic particles, the attraction or cohesion between the molecules of matter. But as you can see, this all would be applied. These facts are too well known to need extended comment from us here. But have you ever considered that all of these things are manifestations of this very principle? Can you not see that the phenomena is on all fours with that of the corpuscles or electrons? And more than this, can you not see the reasonableness of the Hermetic teachings, which assert that the very law of gravitation, that strange attraction, by reason of which all particles and bodies of matter in reality tend towards each other, is but another manifestation of this, the great seventh principle of Hermetics, gender, which operates in the direction of attracting the masculine to the feminine energies and vice versa. We cannot offer a scientific proof of this at this time, but examine the phenomena in the light of this ancient teaching, the Hermetic teachings on the subject, and see if we have not a better working hypothesis than any offered by physical science of today. Submit all physical phenomena to the test. And the book says here, we will discern the principle of gender ever in evidence. Finally, let us now pass on to a consideration of the operation of this principle, but rather on the mental plane than the physical plane. Many interesting features are there awaiting us and awaiting further examination. The next chapter, ladies and gentlemen, will be chapter 14, describing just that, mental gender, and the manifestation of the seventh great Hermetic principle of gender on the second great plane, the mental plane, the plane of mind. Remember, all is mind. All exists within the mind of God. The all is mind and the universe is mental, which was the very first principle, mentalism. The second Hermetic principle was correspondence, as above, so below, as below, so above. Third was vibration, that nothing rests and everything moves, everything vibrates. Fourth was polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles and has its pair of opposites. Rhythm was number 5. Everything flows out and in, everything has its tides, all things rise and fall. Number 6 was the principle of cause and effect. Every cause has its effect, every effect has its cause, everything happens according to law, natural law and the laws, the rules of the nature of reality. And finally, what we are working on today and next episode in this series, hopefully next week or maybe even in the next couple of days, the seventh and final principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything has both its masculine and feminine principles, and this manifests on all planes, ladies and gentlemen. And we will finish here today with our favorite quotes from Hermes Trismegistus, Thrice Greatest, Thoth, Tahat, God of wisdom. Did I move our bookmark? No, I didn't. We made it from page 117 to 124 today. But you have to remember, ladies and gentlemen, because this stuff gets really deep. And so we come back to the Hermetica, the lost wisdom of the pharaohs. And there is the Ibis god, Thoth. But in the first words of Hermes, as we get through the prophecies of Hermes, he says, as you can see here, prophecies of Hermes, pure philosophy is what, ladies and gentlemen, is a spiritual striving. It's probably backwards, it looked like. Pure philosophy is a spiritual striving through a constant contemplation. That didn't work. And I think this was like the lesson to all of us who are going on this journey to try to understand the profound wisdom of the ages of all time. It's like, how do we do this? Like Thoth, Hermes, God, Tao, Atum, grand organized design, whatever you call it. How do we get to this wisdom? How do we understand ourselves and the nature of reality? Well, a pure philosophy is a spiritual striving through a constant contemplation to attain true knowledge of Atum, the one God. A constant contemplation, a constant consideration, a ponderation, a meditation, a rumination, a thinking upon, ladies and gentlemen, so that we can come to understand for ourselves. And now we find the Corpus Hermeticum, original manuscript Hermes Trismegistus, 3rd century AD, which is debated. Of course, all this stuff is debatable. He writes in Hermes Trismegistus, his first book, he says, "O my son, write this first book both for humanity's sake and for piety," which translates to reverence and honor towards God. "For there can be no religion. And those of us that know about religion know the more religious you are, the less spiritual you are." So I like to translate religion to a spiritual pursuit or spiritual philosophy. So there can be no spiritual pursuit, spiritual philosophy, more true or just than to know the things that are. I like to add the word seek there, than to seek to know the things that are. And then to acknowledge thanks for all things. I mean, once we seek to know the things that are, we begin to like have this reverence and honor. Once again, the piety. It's like, wow, look at reality. This is beautiful. This is amazing. We are a part of this creation, and this creation is unbelievable. Like it's unexplainable, unbelievable, undescribable, unimaginable. It is amazing. And so once we begin to get that vision, this seeing of the truth, the seeing of God, this is like purpose of life here. What are we here for? What do we do in life? What's the real reason? Well, we're here to know that there's no better pursuit than to know the things that are, the nature of reality, than to acknowledge thanks for all things to that which hath made them, which thing, hopefully, I will add, we shall not cease continually to do. And then I'll add tend to it. I mean, that's it. Like the simple rules of life given to us by the God of wisdom. But it's like first, you seek to understand life and reality, and then understand that it is creation, and then have reverence and honor and appreciation for that, to acknowledge thanks for all things, and to that which is responsible for the creation of them, and us being a part of that. Once again, if God is universal, that means that there is nowhere that it is not. So that means that it is within you, it is within me, it is within the birds and the trees and the plants and the bees and everything else. Also, rocks and the dirt and the earth. Within and is everything, but is nothing separately. That goes back to previous episodes we've done in all three of these series of the Hermetica, Corpus Hermetica, and currently the Kybalion. But so remember that, ladies and gentlemen, and then tend to it. But I love, he always asks here, Tatme, he's like, what then, O Father, should a man do to lead his life well, seeing that everything, it's like the illusion, mysteries. Everything is an illusion, that there is nothing here that is true. What do we do? And Thoth Hermes replies, be pious, be spiritual, have reverence, have honor, O my son. For he or she that does so is the best and highest philosopher. And without philosophy, it is impossible ever to attain to the height and exactness of these things. But he that shall learn and study the things that are, and how they are ordered and governed, and by whom, and for what cause, or to what end, will acknowledge thanks to the workman. But anyways, that's getting into the beginning of that book. So we will leave it there for today, ladies and gentlemen. Remember to seek to achieve and maintain happiness through enlightenment, through greater awareness and understanding of the nature of ourselves and reality, so that through this increased awareness, we can then increase the quality of our lives and the lives of those around us. Remember to seek to discover the lost wisdom of the ages and the mysteries of our history. And love and appreciate each and every one of you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for joining me. If you joined me here in this video today, be sure to leave a comment and let me know what you got from this. Yeah, it's been a long time, so glad to actually do this again. It's been too long. There will be a link in the description below, I think. Be sure to check that out and expand more the description box below the video to the Kybalion Hermetic Philosophy, so you can get it for yourself to put it on your shelf and follow along in previous or future episodes, as well as a link to the Hermetica, the Lost Wisdom of the Pharaohs, and the Corpus Hermeticum, the Divine Pymander, original manuscript Hermes Trismegistus, 3rd century AD. Those are Amazon links. So it will help support the work that I haven't done here for a past year. That's not true. I've been doing research and study and discovering, contemplating. Remember, pure philosophy is a spiritual striving through what? A constant contemplation, ladies and gentlemen. So, I've also been going through the Bhagavad Gita, many other things, ladies and gentlemen. Before I say ladies and gentlemen 100 more times, I think we will leave it at that. Once again, thank you so much. Also, I believe I will leave the link to C60 Power, the ultimate antioxidant known to man. If you haven't discovered C60 yet, be sure to look it up. It's a Nobel Prize winning antioxidant discovered by Buckminster Fuller. It's something I've been using for a long time. So give yourself the gift of health. And until next time, I love and appreciate you. Be the change that you want to see. Be the example that you want to set. No, 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 no.